On behalf of the UNT College of Information and the Texas Center for Educational Technology, I would like to welcome you this morning. We are delighted to have with us Taylor Shead. Taylor is the founder and CEO of Stimuli, and she's going to discuss how her company, Stimuli, utilizes video games, learn to earn, and Web3 to exponentially improve the student learning experience. Stimuli is a Dallas-based company that's building technology skills for the workforce in order to build a diverse talent pipeline. And they're also the first educational metaverse that has been integrated into a public school in the United States. Recently, Stimuli was awarded the Transformation Award for EdTech by Forbes, and they were named by Unity as a top 25 EdTech application. So thank you, Taylor, for being with us. We're delighted to hear you. And if anybody in the audience has questions, if you'll put them in the chat, Taylor will address them at the end of the session. Thank you, Taylor.
Well, hello, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to meet with you today and share our story. One thing for you to know is I have students that graduated from Dallas ISD that I've worked with from the time that they were freshmen in high school and mentored them all the way through that are actually attending UNT and are hired by Stimuli and working at Stimuli. So I just absolutely love UNT and the wonderful experiences provided for some of the kids that I care a lot about. So as far as today's session, I want this to be very relaxed, in a way almost feel like we're having a conversation at a dinner table, in order to really understand the excitement about what we're doing in Web3 and the Metaverse. I think it's first really important to understand who we are as an organization and a bit about my story. So I'm going to start from the very beginning of my story and then just walk you through to present day. As I'm talking, if there's questions that are burning and you have, please go ahead and send them in the chat, because I want to make sure if it's something that we should address as I'm speaking, I can address it. And if we can wait till later, we can absolutely do that. So just to start and kind of level set on who I am, I want you guys to know I grew up in Plano, Texas. And my background is I am the daughter of two entrepreneurs. My mom hails from Louisiana and my dad from St. Louis. And when they moved into the Dallas Metroplex, it was their opportunity to make it out of poverty, if you will, and start a new life for their family. And with that said, one thing that was very important to my mother is that she put my brother and I in what she deemed as the very best schools. So I went from 2nd to 8th grade to Trinity Christian Academy in Addison. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of that school. I then moved in 9th grade to Bishop Lynch High School and ultimately graduated from Plano West. Something to know about me in high school that is a story that's going to come back at the end of my talk is that I was really passionate about being a reconstructive plastic surgeon. I know that sounds hyper specific, but at the time I knew 3 things. 1, I was really passionate about helping others. 2, biology just made sense to me, whereas sometimes in math classes, it didn't make sense. And then 3, I had grown up watching Grey's Anatomy, so I had an easy example of what it was like to be a doctor in scrubs and helping people in emergencies. With that said, I'm also the youngest of 7 kids to earn a Division I scholarship for either basketball or football, and my particular sport was basketball. And when I graduated from high school, I ended up going to Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles. It was my very first time in LA when I went on that school visit, but I absolutely just fell in love with the ocean and the opportunity, if you will. So now fast forward, I am a student who is sitting in a sophomore level chemistry class, and I'm sitting in my class and I'm looking at the teacher, and I'm sure all of us have been in this position before where you're in a engagement and you notice that you're not paying attention. And during that class, I started having a few thoughts. One thought was, why didn't anybody tell me chemistry was math? I was like, this, whatever they call chemistry is another math course. The second thought I had is, I am so lost that I have no idea if I'm supposed to start at the beginning, if I go to the teacher, what do teachers do when you ask them for help? The very first thing they say is, well, what do you need help with? I was so lost. I didn't know whether to say I needed to start at the beginning of the lesson that day, the beginning of the week, the beginning of the semester, or go all the way back to high school and teach me something I didn't know. With that said, at that point in time, I started to fail other classes because I just did not feel prepared, and depression and anxiety crept in to where I wanted to learn. I had a deep desire to learn, but I wasn't making it into class. And as we all know, the surest way to fail a class is by not showing up. Now, that was a pivotal moment for me, because what ended up happening is honestly one of the most heartbreaking things that ever happened to me, but led to me starting this company that I'm running today. I eventually ended up losing my basketball scholarship because at the time there wasn't a lot of mental health awareness, I guess, for young people. And so when I was going to my coach and telling them that I was having trouble showing up in the classroom, all they heard was, you're not doing your job. You're here, you're being paid to go to school and make good grades, and you're not. And it was a transitional moment because it was the first time that I had experienced a failure of something that I had worked really hard for over 10 years to earn the scholarship. But the way life works is everything happens for a reason. And at my sophomore year, a mentor came into my life and said, Taylor, what did you think was going to happen? Did you think you were just going to graduate at the top of the food chain? The other thing that was mentioned is, you really should look at entrepreneurship as maybe a path for you. And when you consider what you can do in entrepreneurship, consider something that has maybe failed you in life. Why don't you start by trying to fix that thing? And so it was clear to me that my education had failed me. I didn't know whether I had failed myself or, again, it was the system, but it didn't matter. At that point in time, I started working in the school library and just writing business plans. And just to give you some context, because you might not know how old I am, but I graduated high school in 2007. And in 2007 is when the iPhone came out. So I began using an iPhone, a couple years after. And my thought was, why can I not access my education from wherever I am with my phone? Although, again, I had anxiety and depression that was keeping me outside of the physical building in the classroom, if I had access to the teacher's lectures, to all my homework assignments, I absolutely would have continued my journey in learning and succeeded. And so a lot of us ed tech entrepreneurs jokingly say, most of us got in the industry because of Blackboard. We didn't like the experience that it was like in trying to get our assignments and turn work in. So Blackboard is the technology that we used. So the second thing that is just kind of a pivotal moment for me as a young person that I want to share with you all, and maybe it'll help you think, but since you guys are more familiar with technology than I was at the time, this might be a no-brainer for you. So the point in time that I'm starting to think about all the things that I could do in making education more accessible, I had a best friend who was about 20 years older than me, who was a software engineer at Disney. And every time I had this bright idea, I would go to him and say, Moses, can you do this with technology? Moses, can I do that with technology? And the thought that he shared with me that has stuck with me to this day was, Taylor, you've asked me the same question, just a million different ways. You can absolutely do anything you dream of with technology. Your only limitation is your own creativity. Once you figure out that thing that you want to do, what that is, it's on the engineers and the team that you built to execute it. But you have no limitations as far as what technology can do. So one thing I'll share about my company at Stimuli is that is a deep part of our culture. We have unbound thinking, and we're not limiting what we think is possible by what we know how to do or what has been done before, but it's about, there's so many possibilities in the world. So I raised my first round of seed funding with a company that had a terrible brand name, but to me, it meant something at the time. It was called John David Enterprises. And my very first investor was the president of the Learning Company. And the Learning Company basically had the product Reader Rabbit and Carmen Sandiego. So products that I had grown up using and I was absolutely in love with is what the Learning Company had produced. And essentially, he invested about $250,000 to get me started. And if you can imagine now, this is about 10 years ago that I am now what would be the age of about 19 to 20. and I'm going and I'm emailing and calling presidents of any education company or any school system that I could possibly think of. So now I'm going to start to fast forward to me moving back to Dallas and another big pivotal moment for the company. And eventually we'll get to the exciting topic of our metaverse. So when I moved into Dallas, I moved back to Dallas in about 2015. And at the time, here's a couple of things that I had learned about the education system across the entire board. Is number one, America had started and probably for years had a problem with growing their own talent. We were hiring so many folks overseas and outsourcing. And so now the conversation in my mind, as far as the problem that my company needed to solve, became how can we better prepare high school students for their next steps in life? That's the problem that I had encountered. I knew what I wanted to do in high school, but ultimately no one had told me the exact subjects that I needed to learn, and just all the steps that I would need to do to be successful at the next level. Because if they had, I would have definitely focused on doing them. And so the big idea that I had when I was in the process of moving from California to Dallas was, what if we could develop a platform where Fortune 500 companies, their corporate mentors, can help develop curriculum and mentor high school students so that by the time they get into college, they know exactly the subjects they need to know. They know the why. They know everything that they need in order to actually succeed in college and ultimately go into the workforce and a job of their dreams. So coincidentally, around that time, the Dallas Independent School District started a new program called PTech, Pathways to Technology Early College High School. In the chat, I'm sending the URL for that website. PTech was started by IBM about 10 years ago. And what IBM had recognized at the time is that we don't have a lot of minorities that are in STEM or in STEM leadership. So what they decided is they would work through the state of New York to partner with schools and ultimately have IBM mentors training the students while they were in high school. So Texas, we do everything bigger in Texas, found out about this model called PTech, and ultimately they implemented it. And let me tell you a little bit more about what the PTech model in Texas looked like. The PTech model in Texas then took students who were first generation in their families to graduate from high school or college and allowed them to go into this program that was a school within a school. So first thing to know is it wasn't targeted at like the talented and gifted. It was literally everybody who wanted a better accelerated opportunity had the opportunity to enroll. The next thing that the school district did is they partnered with Dallas College. UNT Dallas is a partner. There's several higher ed institutions that are partnered, but they said, we want you to allow our students to get their associate's degrees through your colleges before they graduate high school. So one, the students now were able to get their credential. The second thing is students were able to work with over 90 industry partners, and we're talking about IBM, American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, Microsoft, Thomson Reuters, Texas Health Resources. I could go on and on, Children's Health, a lot of Fortune 500 companies or businesses that have big presence in Dallas in order to get trained and mentored throughout their high school experience, with the idea that by the time that these students graduate high school with their associate's degrees, they would then be able to enter the workforce making above livable wages and ultimately helping mobilize their families out of poverty. So the first year I went into this PTech program, and every Friday I was going into the classroom working with little ninth graders. And what was funny about that is because I wasn't an educator, I had no idea what these young students knew. All I knew is I was going to teach them everything that I thought I should have been taught in order to succeed in college. And so as I was working with these students, I was teaching them a logic and leadership curriculum that I had got from Arizona State University. And ultimately, by the end of the year, me and these students had developed such a bond. We started having a conversation about what next year would look like. And what I came to find out at that time is, even though JP Morgan Chase, GameStop at the time was doing very well, all of these people were partnered with this particular school, Conrad High School I was working at. I started asking the students, so what is your favorite industry partner? How many field trips have you been on? How many interactions have you had with these individuals? And so what I came to find out is they only knew me. And what was troubling to me about that time is that I was almost an army of one at that time. And I was like, okay, I don't have much funding. I don't have many people resources. Where are these businesses that are supposed to be supporting our students? And so that was the beginning of our platform development, where we developed a platform that allowed these high school students to do exactly what my original dream was, is connect virtually to these Fortune 500 companies' mentors. So from that point in time, we developed this platform. Again, it was just called Stimuli, and all it was doing was providing a way for kids to connect virtually, live and asynchronous with these mentors. And then they would go through curriculum to teach them all they needed to know about a corporation. So that was in about 2016. So now if you fast forward from 2016 to 2020, when the global pandemic started, what Stimuli had grown to was from serving 25 P-TECH high schools in Dallas ISD to serving high schools, 7 P-TECH high schools in Garland ISD, P-TECH high schools in Fort Worth, and some on the East Coast. So now we became a regional implementation for support. So I'm going to kind of pause what I'm saying and then show you something about the ecosystem that we have here in Dallas. And then I'll get into the PowerPoint to tell you more about our Metaverse technology and how that came about. So we're almost done with this origin story. So when you look at our regional ecosystem in Dallas, I want to kind of educate you all on what I believe the center of our communities are. I believe the center of our communities are our students who are K through 12 learners across North Texas. And so these learners are at the center. Now with the invention of P-TECH coming into North Texas, what you then had is the partnerships between industry partners, as I mentioned, as well as community colleges and universities. And so ultimately what you have is you have this ecosystem of who's supporting these families in order to take them to the next step. But one thing that you may or may not know is that these families who are at our urban center, who are often low income, and again, first generation of their families to go to high school or college, what you might not know is that there's a group of nonprofits that are supporting the work of the school district in order to ensure that these students are even able to succeed in industry and in college. And then last but not least, when you look at, again, these families at the center, what we all know is attached to a K through 12 learner, you have aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, siblings that are invested in this child succeeding in our or part of their home base. And what we also know is those individuals, again, that are low income struggle in accessing some of these services that would help them succeed, whether it's the unemployment office, whether it's medicine, any of the governmental services that are supporting our community centers. So this graphic here is something that I presented to the U.S. Department of Transportation because they reached out to us and said, you know, Taylor, we believe what you're doing is a use case for something called virtual transportation. So if you're kind of writing down what are some serious use cases of how we can use blockchain technology, Web3, Metaverse-like technology, understand that virtual transportation is something, again, that sounds completely crazy to me when I heard it. I was like, that's interesting, but is a very, very powerful use case for these types of technologies. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and then pull up a presentation so we can dive into a bit more of the technology that we have here. All right. So what you're looking at here are actual real screenshots from our Metaverse platform. And before I go through this, I'll kind of tell you what happened as soon as the global pandemic started. So as I was saying, 2020 was 4 years after I had met those students in their freshman year of P-TECH. And anytime you care about somebody, their problems become your problems, right? And so all of a sudden, it was March 18th, and the superintendent of Dallas schools announces that schools were going to shut down indefinitely. Now, I had done so much work with the Dallas Independent School District. I helped them build their future of learning plan. I understood exactly where they were in the implementation of one-to-one technologies and accessibility. And so at that time, I was literally driving in the car that day, and I'm like daydreaming, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think the school system's going to fail. I don't think this is going to work out really well, because they have no idea how many students in their community have access to Wi-Fi, how many students have computers at home. And then even if they knew that number, one thing that they did not have is an easy way for these students to log in and have access to their teachers online. Because before, school districts wouldn't even meet with business partners on Zoom or virtual engagements. And so I called the chief technology officer of Dallas ISD at that time, and I said, hey, Stimuli is here to help. What do you need help with? And the first thing that he told me is, Taylor, I have no idea what video conferencing solution we're going to use in order to get our students and teachers communicating with one another. You did a phenomenal job of helping our students communicate with mentors. Can you do something that helps them now communicate with their teachers? And so within about 3 to 4 months, I will never launch a project that fast again, but within 3 to 4 months, what we did is we built a virtual classroom on top of our mentorship product, that when students logged in, they saw welcome to your high school, they saw their class schedules, and ultimately when they clicked into their class, they were in the right class with the right group of students with their teachers. And one thing that for you to know is that education traditionally has been very behind. Any governmental systems have almost been very behind in comparison to consumer technology. And so through the process of implementing in June of 2020, what we learned is it was a very hard process to get new rosters from what schools these students were attending to what classes they were supposed to be in to what teachers they were supposed to connect with. So that's one challenge that we first saw. Data interoperability was very, very poor within the school district. The second thing that we recognized once we launched the platform is just because you put students and teachers all together in a single sign-on fashion in essentially a Zoom room does not mean you have an engaging experience. So the next thing that we learned is it's not enough to just have a video conference that students are going to class in. And then the third and last very, very important thing that we learned was how curriculum looked. So me personally, I'm a visual person. When I was a young person, I would grab the picture books to learn from instead of the text heavy books. And as we were looking at curriculum, we became hyper aware of how poor, essentially how different curriculum was versus the world that our students live in, the digital worlds of TikToks and Instagram and Fortnite and Minecraft. And so I was then asked by the superintendent of the schools to say, he said, Taylor, our school district and our teachers and our administrators are focused on solving the problems of today. We're trying to find out where our students are. We're trying to feed them. We're trying to make sure that they're safe and okay. What I would love for Stimuli to do is look forward in the future and see how we can make the student learning experience so engaging that parents are having to pull their students away from their, let's say their computer or from their homework to come to the dinner table. Again, just a thought that doesn't really happen where today's education system is for K-12. And so the next call that I got was from somebody in the technology department that said, Taylor, I've been thinking about it. And if you want to do something that no one else in the world has done, then think about building school into a video game. So I want you guys to keep in mind that this call was made to me in August or September of 2020. So between August and September of 2020, what my team went and did is research on gamification to understand what's happening in the market. Just, is that a advice that we should follow in trying to build an application like that? Does it make sense? And if it does make sense, then what examples do we want to follow for success? And so the three things that we studied were, one, we had to ask ourselves, what does this game need to look like? Should the game look like The Sims, more hyper real? Should the game look like Minecraft, more low poly? Or should it look like something like Fortnite? And what we found is that Minecraft's look and feel, that low poly look and feel, has had so much staying power over the last decades, versus Sims had some spikes over the last decades. And as we all know, Fortnite is very new. So the first thing that we decided with our video game is that we needed to develop this in a low poly style so that students in these large urban centers who are using Chromebooks and mobile phones to access their education were able to do so without the bandwidth of the game pulling that game down. The second thing that we looked at is, what are the reasons that students don't transition from high school into college into this job in the high paying workforce? What are the obstacles in doing that? And what became abundantly clear, and what I had learned from working with these high school students over the last 4 years, was that a lot of these students are having to choose to work at the Chick-fil-A's of the world and restaurants in the service industries in high school and coming out of high school simply because they needed to be able to help support their families. And so the question that we asked ourselves is, how can we build something that allows these students to earn money or earn digital rewards that incentivizes them in learning? And that's kind of a two-pronged approach, because in general with video game mechanics, what we know is video games keep us hooked. And the reason they keep us hooked is because they challenge us. They give us a sense of empowerment, but ultimately we can see the rewards of our work in a way that we felt K-12 education systems weren't doing. And so at that time, we started studying, well, what's going on with video games? Is there any incentive models within video games that users have been getting paid for what they've done? And then what we stumbled upon was an application by the name of Axie Infinity. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you might not have heard of it, but Axie Infinity, I compare it similar to Pokemon, where you have a little character that you kind of breed and you grow to a strength. And then this character can play against another character. And if that character wins the battle, what was happening in Axie Infinity is users were rewarded with cryptocurrency for winning. And ultimately that became what was called the play to earn model with cryptocurrency. And in fact, throughout the pandemic, people in the Philippines were now being able to replace their 9-to-5 job, if you will, just by playing Axie Infinity and earning this cryptocurrency. So that became the addition of our learn to earn model within the Stimuli ecosystem. And then another comparison that we had at the time was an application called Raise Me. I'm not sure if any of you have utilized it, but essentially what it did for high school students is it gave them the ability to earn scholarships just based upon the things that they were already doing. So let's say you're the leader of the chess club. Because you were the leader of the chess club, you would get a $500 scholarship. Let's say, for instance, your team went to the playoffs. You were able to get a $250 scholarship. But again, it was just taking what the students were doing academically and non-academically to improve themselves and giving them a way to earn micro scholarships for doing so. So again, now what we had is we had the design or the look and feel of our game down, where we said it needed to be low poly. We decided that we wanted to go very heavy with the learn to earn model. And then the last but not least that we learned is you can do whatever you want to try and improve student engagement. But if you do not do something that is helping support our teachers, then it doesn't matter what you try and do for students. And so at that time, what we had learned is that there were 23 applications that teachers were having to use throughout the pandemic, at minimum 23 applications for taking attendance, grading homework, lesson planning, and building instruction for the classroom. And so again, the model that we set out to prove is that, one, we can save teachers time by integrating a lot of the tools that they had. And then two, through applied game mechanics, we can enhance the student learning experience so much that our students are excited about learning. And now you would start to see a rise in attendance, which would give the school district more money. So now I'm going to dive into this presentation, and some of it is going to be a recap of what I said about the current state of education, but ultimately we're now going to drill down into exactly what our technology does. So as I've mentioned, the problem that we're seeking to solve for students is student engagement. It is said that 2 out of 3 students disengage in class every day. Mike Morav, the commissioner of the Texas Education Agency, said, in Texas alone, K-12 students have lost trillions of dollars in earning potential just from learning loss from the pandemic. And then last but not least, what we know has happened over these last 2 years through the pandemic is that we've had declining student engagement, which globally has led to a $17 trillion loss in lifetime earnings. We have a massive teacher shortage. There's about 600,000 less teachers in the profession than there were before. And now, because parents have seen into the classroom, they're becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the current system. And so now there's been the invention of things called micro schools, community-based schooling, where parents are now saying, hey, neighborhood, bring your 10 kids over to my house and I will be their learning guide to help facilitate learning from them. Now, the bright spot at the end of this tunnel is the fact that kids retain over 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 50% of what they see. But what MIT says is they retain 90% of what they can do themselves in a virtual immersive environment. So our philosophy around this metaverse and this Web3 product started with Elon Musk, where he said education should be as close to a video game as possible. And if you think about why, it's because games are scalable, one, which means you don't have to train the student on how to play the game. And then two, you don't have to train the teacher on how to teach the student to play the game. Two, if you look at the ability to customize and personalize your avatar, games give students a sense of self-identity and empowerment because they're able to select how they show up in the world. And they can make themselves any different skin color they want. They can be blue, pink, or purple. And then last but not least, game analytics can teach us more about a student than a simple quiz or test. So one aspect of our model that I failed to mention earlier that we studied is in 2020, we started learning about the popularity of Roblox. And what was very important to us about studying Roblox is understanding how in the world, if you wanted to build a system where students were only learning through video games, how in the world could a young startup afford to pay all the Unity developers to develop all the K through 12 content to do that? And ultimately what we figured out is it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. But instead, what we could do is we could build a tool like Roblox Studio, where students could build their own games of learning that would allow them to be the new curriculum writers of tomorrow, where they're developing games that are fun and engaging that could teach other kids how to master certain learning topics. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about August of 2021 when we launched our product and what that product consisted of and where we're headed. And then I'm going to drill down into our AI backbone. I'll give you a demo of the product and then I'll take questions and then just engage in a discussion with you about what we've seen. So now fast forward to January 2021, my team spent 3 months developing a prototype of what could be in a world that combined video games, a learn to earn model, integrated a lot of the applications teachers were needing to use, and then ultimately gave the teacher and the student the ability to start developing their own gamified experiences. So we'd have spent January 2021 in that first quarter developing a prototype. And when we showed it to the Dallas Independent School District, the first thing they said is, Taylor, we're opening a hybrid school, the first hybrid school in Texas, where students will attend class 2 days a week in person and 3 days at home. We would absolutely love it if your platform could be the platform that students went to school in at that campus. And so our team came together and said, okay, we now have about 6 months to actually bring this prototype to life. What is important for that MVP? And what was important for that MVP is that teachers could create lesson plans with our creator tools. They could publish those lesson plans into the 3D classroom. And as students engaged in that content in real time, teachers would be able to see the data on how students were performing in the classroom. So these are live screenshots from our product that you're looking at here. And what you can see is a teacher in a video conference in this 3D game. And so students come into this conference, they select their own avatars, they select, as you can see, you have like football players, cowboys, you have little cows in there, they show up how they want to. And as a student sitting in this classroom, you're not seeing your other friends on a Zoom window, you're seeing them in this 3D immersive environment sitting in the class. And so what we first started with was, as students would turn their homework in, as they would show up to class on time, they would be rewarded with points that they could then use to upgrade their avatar. So for us, that was absolutely MVP, which is, again, you have the student experience with a video game, you have a teacher's interface that's actually controlling the video game, and that's what we launched with. In December of 2021, data came out to define how these students in the hybrid school were performing. And what I'm proud to share is that these students outbeat their peers across the entire district in science, math, and reading on what is called the ACPs, their test scores. And so ultimately what you could see is the students within the hybrid school were at mastery at rates that are almost unseen today in urban centers. So we're talking about fifth graders who are at mastery at levels of 60 and 70%, which, you know, might not seem like a big deal, but again, if your background is education, that just does not happen in schools. And so again, what we knew is something was working right. And then what I want you to kind of, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but follow me here. So you remember that diagram I showed you where I said you have these K through 12 North Texas learners in the center. The next thing that we wanted to figure out how to do is how can we take these same students and give them an opportunity to explore and learn about their careers now? Because as I told you from the beginning, that was always my passion, is how can I help students in the K through 12 classroom really understand what careers were available to them in the future. And so again, with that diagram in the center and with our work with Dallas, Garland, and Fort Worth, what I'll mention is Dallas has 90 industry partners, Garland has about 30, and so does Fort Worth has about 30. If you look at industry partner engagement, let's say there's about the top 15 to 20% of partners in each school district that are highly engaged. So if you look at engagement, Dallas is going to have a lot bigger engagement than Garland and Fort Worth. And I simply felt like that is absolutely unfair. All students living in North Texas should have access to the same ability to explore their careers in their future as the ones with the biggest school district. And so what we are designing is what's called a global business district, where land will be NFTs, and it'll allow Fortune 500 companies or really anybody to come in that we vet that says, I want to develop a digital pathway for students that's relevant to careers. And so let me give you this example. Going to school in Los Angeles, I had friends that grew up in Portland, Oregon, and they always had a concept from a very young age that they can work at Nike one day. Whereas me growing up in Dallas, I had no concept that I could work at Nike one day, even though my parents were entrepreneurs and taught me to dream big. And so our idea behind this global business district is, as a student, if you wanted to learn about a career in Hollywood, you would be able to jump into the Hollywood world that was built by our no-code game creator tool and learn and join a career path to becoming a director in Hollywood. Alternatively, you could start exploring that, and then you could go and jump into the New York career pathway and learn more about a career in fintech. Or then the idea that you can jump out of New York and go to a career in Dallas and learn about a career in biotech. All the possibilities that could be enabled by essentially NFT land sales and our no-code game development tool that allows these brands and these partners to come into our space and build on our platform their own immersive worlds. So with that said, as far as the three things that I kind of touched on, I'll just sum this up before we now go into our data backbone, is our dream is that we would do something similar like South Korea has. I don't know if anybody saw this, but South Korea invested 187, I believe it's $1 billion in developing a national metaverse. And so we want to have an industrial metaverse that, number one, kids could start accessing it through their public schools or private school systems in K through 12, but ultimately that would serve the entire family and that entire ecosystem that I drew with virtual transportation. So the idea that family members could come into this metaverse and access educational or learning activities or government services, but ultimately anywhere that these students needed to go and any support that needed to have access to would come via this industrial metaverse that we invite small nonprofits, large nonprofits, charter schools, community-based schools, and K through 12 institutions to come into. 2, solving the engagement problem, again, was with our 3D avatars, our learn to earn model, and our digital reward system. And 3, how do we scale this and build these immersive worlds is through our Roblox Studio-like no-code game development tool. So with that said, we're now going to transition into what I want to do is I believe my partner joined us. Wade, are you on here with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Wade's going to give us a tour of the metaverse. And then the last thing that I'm going to finish with is our exact data backbone, which is a new development that is just going to make the power of our metaverse even stronger. So I'll stop sharing and turn it over to Wade.
Cool. Thanks, Taylor. I just need access to share my screen.
Taylor, are you also a host?
I am not.
Sandy, are you a host?
I think she said one.
Okay, I see it now.
Yes, working on it.
Perfect. Adam stepped away, so I would I got nervous, but
Yeah, no
we can handle
problem.
it.
And just for the sake of time, I see that we are almost at time. So just for the sake of time, what I'll do is I'll kind of talk over. Okay, perfect. Take it away, Wade.
Okay, cool. Hold on. Okay, cool. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So as Taylor mentioned, this is our metaverse, and I'm logged in as a student. And immediately where we're dropped into is our common area. And we've modeled this after Dallas. And you'll see the Mavericks Arena back here in the background. And what I'm going to do first is run over to our kind of conceptual way to demonstrate the global business district. And kind of while I'm running through this, just kind of imagine, like Taylor was saying, these corporations can be inside this game. And they can advertise the different job opportunities to the student, the different career pathways. And the student could enter these headquarters and essentially get information about these companies to understand what it takes to actually get their foot in the door here. And I'm running over to this this automotive shop because I really want you to imagine if, for example, if Toyota was an industry partner, and they created a headquarters that has some sort of factory line inside of it. And a student could go into this factory and essentially take apart a car and learn really about the assembly line and just what it really takes to run a factory and to run a corporation like that. So that's what we have here is we have some models of different cars in here. And another thing as well that I'll just touch base on real quick is we've created a concept of quests where industry partners, teachers, just really anyone that's trying to teach a student some concepts, they can create experiences that leverage this game to teach a variety of different concepts. So right here we have a space quest where a student can go up to this astronaut right here, and essentially they present a problem. So they need some help with some calculations. And what it'll do is it'll play a quick video and it'll take a moment, but it'll describe forces in motion. And then when we close out of this, it'll ask us some questions. We're just going through this. And then great, we've got those answers right. And then the last thing is to pick up some rocket fuel. So we run over here. And this is just a really simple way to demonstrate what we can do. So we pick that up and then now the rocket ship will take off. So really just any experience that the industry partners want to have in the game, we want to enable them to do that and to really create the content. So the content itself is really endless. So I guess, Taylor, do we want to do the live classroom? Or is there anything?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I want Wade to go into the live classroom and I'll talk through it, Wade, because I want to show you all this data backbone. So
Okay.
as he's going into it, I'm just going to tell you a quick story. So Thank you for the comments that you sent in the chat. So you'll see maybe what Wade will come on the video conference in the classroom and he'll go through different learning activities. But as most people talk and hear about Stimuli, as you can tell, they're like, wow, this team is so passionate and this is just a big shift for where we're at. The other thing that they'll recognize is like, hey, Stimuli is attacking our urban center, meaning we're going to the heart of where the problem has the biggest need. And so oftentimes people will say, I hope they can make it to the, sorry, Wade, I hope they can make it to the next step and succeed, but how are they going to? So I'm proud to announce that the person that built Google Maps, his name is Pram. He left Google about 12 years ago and started building something called the GPS of learning. And ultimately, he spent 12 years developing this great algorithm and AI and machine learning system that allows the student to understand, hey, stop sharing your screen really quick, Wade. So I'll go through this and toggle back over to you. So what he did is, I'm just going to quickly share this with you. So the story I told you at the beginning about myself knowing I wanted to go somewhere, but not having the right steps guiding me, he created this GPS of learning that assesses where the student is now. And then they define a destination and the platform takes them through a series of learning experiences to meet that destination. And so ultimately what you get is you get a system where every student has what's called a skyline. And what that skyline is exactly where that learner is in their learning process. And so this is all mapped by state standards, by the way. So what I mean by that is this white line shows everything that student has already mastered. And that student can set a destination. The destination could be reading on grade level, it could be making it into college or your dream career. And the system is consistently moving them from their skyline to their highline with personalized activities that allows them to move from here up to here. And ultimately what we're doing now is Pram is acting like a chief technology of our company. He's had products that have been used by billions of users, but we're now taking his tech that used to exist in a 2D world and implementing it into the game where now as a student, you would have this GPS of learning that's guiding you through different learning experiences through that metaverse, and that's personalized to you. So I wanted to mention that because the biggest thing that we need to do is assure learning can happen and ensure that we're moving the needle for student outcomes. And through the integration of this technology that's already been used by 8 million people worldwide, we're combining and joining forces as one, where ultimately within the next year, we might be able to turn a light on within the next 24 months that allows us to bring 30 million students into the metaverse through partnerships that we have through that platform Guru. So that's a whole other complete cool thing, but I'll stop sharing, Wade, hop back on, jump into the classroom experience. And I would encourage you all, as you have questions, to just send them in the chat and we'll try to get them answered because I want to be mindful of everybody's time today. So essentially, as I mentioned, we built a socket system that allows the teacher to control sending lessons into this metaverse product. The student goes through and is answering these questions, and depending on what they answer, the teacher sees it in real time where their entire class is in their learning experience. And then Wade, as you do that, I'm gonna keep going, but I'm gonna jump back and show that Guru Navigator as well. And as far as how you can help, connect with us online. Our social handle is Stimuli Tech. On LinkedIn, you can find me at Taylor Shead. And I think the start is just building our community. That's really what we need to do next. In Web3, the biggest thing is how you're supporting communities. So I definitely want to have you guys join in our community, but that's one of the main things. And Dan, to your question, that's our system is going to have a virtual economy that teaches students entrepreneurship. So as they're earning these points, they then have the option to actually buy land. Then our system will instruct them on, is it better to buy land and build a house, a storefront, an apartment building, and just to walk them through how do you actually buy land in the real world, and ultimately allowing students to become entrepreneurs in our metaverse. And then again, allow them to build their own immersive worlds, invite customers in and start earning their own funds. And then Alba, as far as how we're capturing and documenting this historical cultural shift, if you have any ideas about how we can capture that, I am so open to that because I don't know that we figured out exactly the best way to capture it. People have captured our story like the Dallas Observer did a cover story on us a few weeks ago, but we're open to any recommendations you all might have. And send me a message on LinkedIn if you have some of those ideas of what that could look like. So wait, I'm going to click into the Guru Navigator
Okay, go for it.
real quick. Give me 1 second. So this is what our backend is as far as the data that is shown to a teacher. So this is an entire class view of everybody's Highline and Skyline. And so ultimately, these are all the domains the student needs to learn for 8th grade math. And as a teacher, you can actually go in and by standard actually see what the student has mastered versus what they haven't. And one thing to think about as far as cognitive load for teachers is my 8th grade math teacher might know that I am teaching Taylor in this class the quadratic equation, and that is tied to standard 8.1. But what the teacher might not know is if Taylor is failing at standard 8.2, what content is best served for Taylor in order to move her up so where she masters the entire concept. So the AI and machine mechanism that's coming through this system is constantly measuring the most effective content to teach this exact standard to move me as a student from this high skyline to this high line. And so, you know, the next evolution would be, instead of it being the content and curriculum that's available in today's classrooms, would be our games of learning, moving the student from their skyline to their highline. But I did just want to show you all how robust this data backbone is and the type of data and machine learning that we're providing to teachers that just really hasn't existed before. So can you imagine if my college teacher or myself had known in that chemistry class, this is where Taylor missed in 7th grade math, she missed this one topic. And what we're betting on is that as a student or as an instructor, if there is something that we know is a deficit, then we would do everything that we can to fill that deficit for ourselves or for our students. So sorry, I talked a little bit over time. I got lost in the sauce, as they say, but if anybody wants to come off mute and ask any questions or make any comments, I would absolutely love to hear just your thoughts on what you have to share. So you're more than welcome to do that in the time we have. And then Deborah and team, please let me know if alternatively we're out of time and we need to end the session.
Thank you so much, Taylor. What an excellent program you've developed. And this is so exciting, the opportunities for students. So we do have a few minutes for questions. So if anybody has a question, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Taylor. And thank you, Wade. Great presentation from you as well. You're a good runner.
Thank you.
It looks like Alba has her
I'm
question.
looking at the chat box. I noticed, I'm starting at the end.
I think there's a question from Southeast Asia.
I had requested you access to your platform from the Southeast Asia subcontinent, but you never turned back. Any hope to be able to get a response from you in near future?
Absolutely. Shoot me an email again and let's
I
get
don't know, that may be something you need to address outside of,
yeah.
of the program today. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, send me an email and we'll get that handled.
Okay, well, I'll go back to the next question then, which is the same question I had from Dan. Are you sharing your story with students? Your personal story would be such an inspiration to students.
I would love to. So whether
I think you're
that
muted again.
Oh, am I muted? Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I would love to share my story with students. That's something that Wade and I are just very personally passionate about. So whether that means showing up in person at UNC, I do live in Dallas, I'm happy to do it, but any means that I can share my story with students, like that's what we do this all for. So I would absolutely love to. Any opportunities you all have where I can connect with them, you can just count me in.
Great. And let's see if we missed any other questions.
I see a question on plans for expansion. So our goal, that's a great question. I'm excited to share this with you. So ever since Guru partnered with us, our goal is can we reach 200,000 students in the next 3 months so we can show investors the rate in which we could grow is tremendous. And so we are launching our program in New York, Chicago, and DC next year. And it's potential that there will be other areas that we're launching, but we're starting there. And I'll tell you that we are going to be heads down focused on execution, because what we would love to do is raise $100 million round in order to continue building out this metaverse and this AI backbone to serve lifelong learning really across the world. So we have some ambitious goals, but we're trying to start that fundraise by March of 2023. Students access the platform by downloading the school districts are downloading the apps on the students' computers, but accessibility is expanding to mobile for this coming year. And do students need a head-mounted glasses for VR? So because we serve this urban center, we did not go VR first. Our vision is that when students want to jump in different experience, so let's say they wanted to jump into a VR lab, they could then put on the VR goggles and have that experience. And in the future, if students want to run around the world in VR, they will be able to do that. But again, we really want to meet these school districts where they are, and the idea that they need to buy $300 headsets for all of their students isn't very practical. So Alba, as far as how we get school districts to adopt this, working with any public institution is a bit complex, but we do have an implementation process where first we roster their students. 2, we then serve them all of our content that's already existing in the platform. And as we're doing that, what we're doing is we're having schools implement their assessment data, so we have a better informed skyline. But ultimately, it's just direct sales. It's, you know, relationship building that allows you to launch in these school districts. And then ultimately, the vision would be, you know, a direct-to-consumer model where you can be a family anywhere in the world and you can log into our application, pay a very, very small fee, and have access to the exact same learning tools as you would if you went to an institution that's already using our technology. Exactly, homeschoolers, exactly. So in some of my speeches, what I'll tell people is we want to serve classes of 1 or classes of 1 million. And that is the exact idea that whether you're teaching your own student at home alone, whether you're teaching 10 students in your neighborhood, or you're some of these ambitious school programs that are serving hundreds of thousands of students, everybody deserves to have the access to the same great technology, not just the big school systems, not just the small ones, but really everyone.
We have time for one more question. Does anybody else have a question? And you're welcome to just verbalize it or put it in chat either.
While we're waiting for the question, I'll share with you that Wade and I's goal, we worked for Apple for a few years. That's where we met. Our goal is to be the first $1 trillion education company. And we wanted to be here based in Dallas. So, you know, our vision would be, can we hire thousands of students coming through the education systems here in North Texas and give them an opportunity to work for our company, you know, right out of high schools because they were so well trained. So that's a little bit about our vision for, you know, how we grow within Dallas. Where can we try out the platform? Send me an email and we'll put you all on a list so you can be, if you want to come into our world, like when we do beta test of our platform, that we can invite you in first. And my email is taylor@stimuli.net. So just shoot me an email, and if you want to make the subject line like add me to the beta tester list or something like that, then we can get you into the platform when we give early access releases. There's absolutely an opportunity for internships. Same thing, shoot me an email, and if you're looking for an internship, just add in the subject line internship, and if you want to put like UNT and then the area that you would think of interning, then feel free to write that, whether it's game development, web development, or the business and operations side.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Taylor. This just makes the future of education look so exciting. We really appreciate your information and the ability to continue to communicate with you so that hopefully we can build with you in the future. So thank you. Excellent presentation, and you've done amazing things. We're excited for you and for education in the future. And thank you to all of the attendees. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure.